Hello, my name is Keith, here for managing OS provided Postgres packages. I'll give you a few more, another minute or two. If you need to see slides a little bit better, you can go to this URL down here at the bottom. It's actually the same exact thing I'm running up here. So, yeah, I'm a database administrator at OmniTI. I'm the author of a couple extensions of PG Partman, Mimeo, PG Extractor, and I talked about a bloat monitoring script. I'll have a URL to my website up at the end, or actually anything that you see that's orange on here, if you're following along, is actually a live link that you can go click on and it'll go somewhere too. So OmniTI, I work with OmniTI. We're a full stack consulting company. Basically, support everything down from the hardware all the way up to the website front end, mostly for high traffic websites and applications. We deal with very large websites, large databases. Some examples of some clients we have there that you may have heard of. We actually also host a scalability conference every year in September. It's actually next week. It's in Washington, D.C. And we are actually also hiring. Mostly right now we're looking for sysadmins or developers. So if you know anybody you're interested, please feel free to come talk to me. So this talk is mainly, it's not about building Postgres packages for these operating systems. It's about the packages that these operating systems provide and how they actually work. And so basically for all of these, you can start here at the Postgres main website and /download. That has everything from the binary package to source code. It has live CDs that are just ready to go. It has application suites like stuff from Docker and all that kinds of stuff for there. This is mainly just going to be going over 3 major OS package management ways. So I'm going to start off with the Debian way. This is actually the same way Ubuntu does things, and any Debian or Ubuntu-based distribution pretty much follows this sort of pattern. Right now, the latest version of Debian is 8.5. So this is the way this one works right now. So by default, the OS packages, and it's the same way in a lot of operating systems, the package that it comes with is not the latest, usually not the latest version. Thankfully, Debian's been pretty up to date. They're up to 9.4 is actually the one that it comes with, so it's not too bad. But if you actually want to get the latest version of any of the Postgres packages, you can go. It's an easy URL to remember. If you're a Debian person, it's app.postgresql.org, and that basically just redirects to the Postgres wiki that has the full instructions on how to manage that for any of them. And I'll actually be going through a little bit of a demo. Hopefully the Wi-Fi cooperates. It's not critical for the presentation, but this repo actually has all of the by default, Debian only comes with not the 9.4 package. If you install this repo, it has 9.1 through 9.5 available, and it also the people that maintain this put a bunch of third-party packages and stuff in there as well. Shameless plug for PG Partman. Somebody is maintaining that in the apt repo for me, so whoever that is, I appreciate it. So these are the main packages. They all kind of follow the same naming pattern. It has the name and then a major version as a 9.5, 9.4. This one without any name to it is the server package. And then all of the other individual ones are basically what they say they are. Debian has some additional ones. I'll get into the cluster management a little bit later. PSQL Common and libpq are actually their own individual packages. If you install the server package, it will install the client and Common and libpq automatically all along with it. But if you don't need the full server, you have all these other package options. If you just need to write an application that needs libpq, that's all you have to install. You don't have to install the full Postgres thing. Some non-version package, like these other ones that don't have a version on them, like Common and libpq, they are actually associated with whatever major version, the latest major version that you have installed is. You can install 9.1 through 9.5 all at the same time on Debian, and they won't clash with each other. But these packages are associated automatically with whichever one is the most recent one, and it goes by. If you can actually manage this in any Debian Vision. Operating system with what they call version pinning in apt. It's basically in this in the apt preferences folder. You just make a file. You can call it whatever you want. It just goes through and reads the file in there, and it has these formats. So this is saying any package that starts with PostgreSQL and the libpq package and libpq dev package, you want to keep these, and you can actually pin it down to the minor version. We actually had a client that had, it was an issue with the compatibility between the major versions, and so when they installed the new major version, their application broke. So they actually had go in there and they pin it down to the minor version now. And this pin priority and that priority is pretty much what tells the operating system which one of these is the latest version. Whichever one has the highest priority, that's what they'll associate the common and libpq5 package with. So once you install the package, it's got a pretty standard data directory structure. The data directory goes into varlib, and all the major versions have their own version folder. But then once you get into the way it manages clusters a little bit later, your cluster actually has a name that goes along with it. The default one's called main, so the first one would be 9.5/main. And then the same wherever you see cluster name for the rest of these, that's what it calls it. The binaries all go in, and these binaries are not what's actually in your path. I'll get to that a little bit later. What is actually in your path for what you're going to is actually somewhere else. But if you need to call PGCTL directly for some reason, that's where the binary is actually located. And if you need to install extensions and all that kind of stuff manually, this is where you install those things. And like most operating system, it tries to keep all the logs in the log directory, makes its own log directory there. All the logs go there. If you want to have the operating system manage automatically starting and stopping it, using the operating system manage clusters, there's a in the config directory, which is back here up here at etc PostgreSQL 9.5. There's a file called start.conf, and there's one of 3 values you set in there. By default, automatically it's auto. That means it'll automatically start the instance when the operating system starts, and it'll automatically shut it down when it shuts down. If you don't want it to automatically start, but you still want to be able to manage it with the wrapper scripts that I'll go over later, you can set it to manual. That lets the wrapper scripts still manage it, but the operating system won't automatically start it. And if you just want it completely disabled, automatically just set it to disabled. Note that does not stop people from calling PGCTL directly and starting the cluster. It just stops the operating system from managing it. So when you when you use the wrapper scripts to manage clusters and stuff like this, or you just use the initdb on Debian, it automatically makes a system user called Postgres. It automatically makes a role in the database called Postgres. This is the default hba.conf that it gives you with the lines that are actually activated. I truncated a whole bunch of other stuff out. So by default, when you first set up a cluster, a lot of people have problems that they try to log in as their own user and they can't. So you have to actually change to the Postgres user because by default, you have to have a user with the same name in the role name in the database to be able to log in. So by default, you have to change to the Postgres user, log in, make some new roles, and then you can log in by just matching the username. You don't actually have to give a password by default. If you want password authentication by default, that actually is set up by default for TCP connections, but you have to go in there and set that up automatically or set that up manually. And one other thing a lot of people forget to do automatically is the PostgreSQL.conf is only by default listening on localhost. So you have to go in there and edit the PostgreSQL.conf to change that to star for anything or a specific IP address for your application servers. This is the big thing for managing PostgreSQL and Debian and any Ubuntu-based system. When I first saw these, I didn't like them at all, but now I actually do really, really like them. They make if you have to manage multiple clusters of Postgres on a single instance, this makes it a lot easier. It basically has these are wrappers around the commands that like to create DB is the binary that comes with Postgres. This is basically a wrapper around create DB, but it automatically creates new data directories. It'll automatically select the next port that's available and make that the automatic port that instance is using. And you can actually manage the multiple major versions with this as well. You can run 9.2, 9.3, 9.4, 9.5 all at the same time, managing it through these wrapper scripts. This is basically a replacement for PGCTL. It's got some additional options to it. You actually give it what major version you're going to be starting and stopping and the name of the cluster. that you can set for yourself. I'll try to go do a demo of it to show you. It does have this PG upgrade cluster wrapper. I highly recommend not using it. It really, if you ever look at the PG upgrade command, it has options for telling it where the old and new binaries are, where the old and new data directory are, a whole bunch of other options for like whether you want to do linked or not linked and all that kind of stuff. That is all hidden by this because Debian does know where its binaries are, where the data directory are. So all you have to tell it is what the name of the cluster and the version you're going to and from. But if anything goes wrong, you have no idea what went wrong. You have to you don't know where the log files it made went, and it just makes it really, really hard. It's much better to go look at the PG upgrade command yourself and understand how it actually works. If at that point then you still want to use that, you may, because then you have a better idea of what it's doing, but I would just recommend not using it at all. You can use the create cluster command to create the new cluster, and then just go use PG upgrade manually from there. You'll probably save yourself a whole lot of headaches. It's one of the biggest, I hang around in the PostgreSQL channel on IRC, and every single person I've seen come with try to use this command, they always come complain about it not working right. Or something went wrong, and they don't know what went wrong because they don't know where to go look and what went wrong. This is just some other handy scripts. This lists all the clusters that it's managing for you if you need to rename one. And PSQL is not actually the direct PSQL. It's a wrapper script around PSQL that points to the latest PSQL that's available for what version you prefer. So I'll get into that a little bit in a few seconds. So this is the way both Debian and CentOS manage what it calls default versions of packages when you can install multiple versions of it. It does this for a lot of things like Java and PHP and all that kind of stuff. So it also does this for Postgres. This is how it installs multiple versions at the same time. And there's this update alternatives command is what it uses to manage that. So you can see I cut out a whole bunch of stuff here. These are the two alternatives that Debian manages for Postgres. This is the main server process, and this is basically all of the other wrapper scripts is what this PSQL is for. So you can see what its update alternatives and what it's actually managing is. It's got two versions of 9.4 and 9.5 installed. So you can see that it's managing those two versions by using the display command. And when you actually want to change this, so say you need to go back, you want to change, you had 9.4, you installed 9.5, but you want to use the 9.4 PSQL for some reason, by default for everybody, you can use the config command to update alternatives. And if you don't give it any parameters, it'll pop up this menu for you, and you can then tell it which one you want to do. You can see the first one, it does the auto mode, and it goes by this priority number just happens to, the way they did it happens to coincide with the version number of Postgres, but the higher the number, the higher the priority, and that's the one it'll use. Yes?
So this is controlling which binary the PSQL wrapper calls?
Yes.
And each binary has its own wrapper like this, controller thing, or just PSQL?
On Debian, I think it's just PSQL. I'll show CentOS. CentOS actually has one for everything. And I'm actually not quite sure if it does it for everything. If you look at what the PostgreSQL, the Postmaster one may actually control some of the other server controller ones. But this is usually the one that you usually see people want to be able to control better, so it's the example that I gave. So right now, by default, it's set to auto, so whichever the highest priority version that's installed in, that's the PSQL that'll be used, but you can set it to whatever other version you would like. So the other bane of the existence now that's on Debian is now systemd. I think they've been improving some of this. I've gone back and looked at some of it. It's gotten a little bit smarter, but it's still some major caveats with it. That by default, if you use pgctl cluster to create a new cluster, systemd is not aware of it, and it will not start it, and it will not stop it automatically. They have added some warnings to when you run pgctl cluster that you have to go run the systemd command. but you still have to do that in addition to this. And if you go around the services module to start and stop the cluster, systemd is not aware that you're doing that. So it'll still think, if you stop it, systemd may still think it's running. If you start it, systemd may not know that it's running. So you kind of have to use, you really have to use services to start and stop PostgreSQL on Debian now with systemd there available. If it's something you want to be automatically started and stopped by the operating system. And one thing to be very, very careful of is if when you're using the systemd commands to start and stop Postgres, in 9.4 the default is still smart. So it waits for active connections to stop before it will actually shut down the cluster. 9.5 itself has the default of now being smart, but there's no option in the systemd command to pass the -m to mode. So if you need to shut down Postgres before 9.5 on a systemd system, you have to use pgctl, and systemd will not be aware of it. So yeah, the really recommended thing to do is to, if you can get on 9.5, it gets rid of a lot of the headache because the default is no longer smart. The default is fast, and then systemd works better with it. But because there's no flag for the M in the systemd control, it makes starting and stopping things a little bit more of a challenge. So I think that was it for there. So I'll try to go and do a little bit of a demo here. Oops, that's not the right browser. So here it has a handy little command for getting, by default, the repo, the apt repo for Postgres is not in Debian, of course. Oops, it's not the copy I wanted. So you go here, and all this basically does is add the apt repo to the Postgres apt repo in there, and so it doesn't complain about the key. There's also an option here to get the key for that apt repo, so it doesn't complain about unauthorized packages. Yeah. So once you do that, update. Actually, before I do that, so if you do, actually, I don't have to get update. Good. So now if you do, I think it's so now you can see there's actually a whole bunch of, it's got all of the, actually goes back to 8.4 for some things now, I guess. So it's got all of the packages there are now available. I lost my, so. Oh, sorry. There's no need for a server on Debian. So you see it'll automatically grab all the other packages that it needs for Postgres if you just pick the server. And by default, it automatically does set up a cluster for you when you install the package. So you'll see it going through that once it gets the package installed. So there it's setting up a cluster for you. And then you're done. If you do PG-LS clusters as yourself, you probably won't. Oh, actually, it does. I think they fixed that, so it does actually show some things, even if you're not the Postgres user or the user of the database itself. It shows it better now. So right now, there's you can see the version, the name of the cluster is main, the port that it's on, online. So if you want to make a new cluster, AG create cluster 9.5 new. automatically does it for you, and do it ls. You can see it doesn't have it started by default and automatically pick the next port that's available. You can see the directory where it puts everything. So pg ctl cluster start 9.5 new. Oops. That's disturbing. No, it's version, cluster, act. Oh, yeah, 9. It had everything in the wrong order. Start. There we go. So now both of them are running. So now you have multiple clusters up and running. So it actually it does make managing multiple clusters a lot easier in Debian and that kind of stuff. So I like it. Just avoid the upgrade script for it. So any questions about Debian? Okay. So CentOS. Actually, when I first wrote this, it was 7 hadn't quite come out yet, and I'm still not quite up on systemd, and systemd is much more invasive on CentOS than on Debian than it was. So I just stuck with the old way of doing things on CentOS because all of our clients are still either running 5 or 6, and that's what we see for the most part with people running CentOS. So that's what this demo is based on. It's the latest version of 6. So as with Debian, this one actually has a very, very old default version. The default version in 6 is still 8.4. I'm not sure it's actually even up to date in 7. I don't know what it actually is there. It may still be 8.4 or even 9.0. Both of those are EOL. So if you're using CentOS, you most definitely want to go to the Postgres download section and get the RPM for the latest major version. So it's basically, there's one RPM for, so I'm using Rel 6 and 9.5. This -2 is not like the minor version of Postgres, that's just their package management thing. So their RPMs are based on the major version. So all you have to do is go download that RPM, install that RPM, and then that makes 9.5 available on your system from the official repos. Things are switched from what they were on Debian. The client package is the one without the name now, without the specific name, and CentOS names the server. So if you want to install everything, install the one that actually has server in the name of it, and that'll include the libs and the client package along with that. It does not have common and libpq as separate libraries. Those are actually part of the server package, I believe, or the libs package, one of those two. Setup, unlike Debian, it does not automatically create an instance for you when you install the package. So, but it does have a, in the service command, it has an initdb kind of wrapper in the service command to automatically set things up for you in its own default locations, which will be on the next slide. So basically, you use the service command for PostgreSQL line 5, and you just say initdb. You don't have to say anything else, and it makes the default location for you. Then to have it automatically start and stop, you use that's the CentOS and Rel service management check config, turn it on, and then start the service from there. And then if you want to stop it, you can use it has, you can pass mfast and all that kind of stuff to the service command, and it works just fine. Yes, Bruce?
Can you pass checks on the initdb?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. So. If you need to create additional instances, you cannot use this. This only creates the one default instance that CentOS manages for you. If you need to create more instances, you have to use the initdb that comes with the Postgres package and define where everything you want to go is.
But then how does it know to start and stop and stuff like that?
I'll get onto that. Yep. So file locations. Again, different. Debian kind of broke everything out. It put the config files in etc and put the log files in log and separated things out according to the way the operating system works. CentOS just keeps things mostly the way Postgres by default does. It makes a data directory that the config files are contained in the data directory. The log files are contained, except for it actually has a separate startup log, which confuses people. If your server is not starting for some reason, that won't be in the Postgres log. That will be in the startup log. So you have to know to go look at this startup log to see startup problems. But the database logs themselves are by default in the PG log of the data directory. Everything else is pretty much in standard locations for binaries and libraries on CentOS. Similar again, same user, same role is created by default, but the default HBA is a little bit different. It's not peer and MD5, it's ident for both. So locally, that's basically the same thing as peer. But if you're doing a TCP connection and you're running an ident server, it will try and go to the ident server first, and then fall back to just trying to match what your user is to a user in the database. Everything else has to be set up manually, and again, by default, listen address is commented out, so it only listens locally. So you have an application, you have to fix that. This is the one thing that was majorly different. The update alternatives, it uses update alternatives to manage default binaries and stuff like that when you have multiple major versions installed again. But I just did this list just to show what's in there. So it has individual alternatives for every command. So if you scroll all the way down here, there you can see is PSQL. And actually the man pages have their own thing as well. So dump, PSQL, all of them are all managed by alternatives. So if you just let the package manager take care of all this stuff, and when you install a new version, it will update all these alternatives for you to the latest version. But if you need to change these, you have to go change them one at a time to what you want them to be. And again, it's a little bit different too. The display, it doesn't have auto as a choice when you try to do the config. Auto is an option to the update alternatives command if you want it to be automatically chosen. That's what the little plus there, I think, is telling you, that it's automatically picking that one, but it's not a choice in the menu like it is on Debian. You actually have to pass it as a flag to that command. And again, this is for just the PSQL command. If you need to do this for dump and all that other stuff, you got to do them all one at a time. So service management, there's no wrapper scripts in CentOS. I don't know if they have added them in CentOS 7. I don't think they have. But it's not that bad. As of 9.0, it's not that bad. Before 9.0, it was really, really hard to run multiple major versions at the same time. Mostly because the package didn't have a version number on it either, so you couldn't install major versions at the same time. Now the packages have a major version along with it, so you can install from 9.0, you can install 9.0 to 9.5 all at the same time. And if you have multiple clusters at the same time, basically you use the initd that it comes with, and in initd it makes this file. Just make a copy of that file, and in the same directory, and what you need to do, and go in there and edit it. The thing to be careful of, and this is the way it works in the default for the default cluster, is there's this, when you scroll down in this file, there's this overrides option, and that is where it actually sets the data directory and the port, not up here in the actual thing. There's options for it in that file, but they're then later overridden if that file exists. So that's why you'll see on CentOS, if you go in and edit the port on the PostgreSQL.conf, that will not update the port that the service runs it as. You have to change it here in the service script. So just be very careful. Either be consistent in using the sysconfig overrides, that's where you set your port and data directory and all that kind of stuff, or just don't use that. So it's just be consistent, and it makes things easier. But if you're using one then the other, it makes things really confusing for somebody else that comes to look at what you're running. Yes, Bruce?
So you're saying if you have one cluster and you set the port there using the sysconfig, and you try and create another cluster, it's going to pull in from over here.
If this override is set, you can see that the name is actually a variable here. So it goes by this name that you have set up here. So if the file doesn't exist, it doesn't override. But if the file is there, it does override. And the default cluster that CentOS makes an override file.
And the command line are to override
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. So it can be until you get your head wrapped around all this and see how it actually works. It takes some work to actually see how CentOS manages it. But once you know how it manages it, it's not that bad as long as you know how it manages it and you know how to go in there and do it. It's just figuring it out is the puzzle. It's one of the reasons I made this presentation was to have a reference for myself for how all these operating systems are doing all this stuff. So let's give it a try on demo for rel. I'm going to go back here and grab this yum command. So I got a CentOS. So these VMs I set up are basically all I did was download the VM and run the yum update to make sure all the packages are up to date. I didn't do anything else. So this is like a bare bones CentOS install. The other one was a bare bones Debian install. There's nothing special extra I did before I did anything of what you saw. So I got everything up and running that quickly on the operating system, and hopefully that'll work the same here. So yeah, the big difference in Debian and CentOS is CentOS has a package for each major version. Debian has one repo for everything. So if you want to have multiple major versions of Postgres on CentOS, you have to get the RPM for each one. Yeah, there we go. So that's just pulling in the. There you go. So now it's back. Sorry. It's doing weird things on my screen.
Yeah, it does this little stick on the last signal it receives.
Yeah.
Oh, no, you're doing something.
Yeah, there we go. Okay. So I just wanted, as I said, get confused which one says server and which one doesn't for the server. So sudo yum install PostgreSQL 9.5 server. Yeah, it automatically grabs the client and the libraries package for you.
Is that the only way to know which version you're actually getting?
What?
Like in everything that's gone by on the screen, that's the first time I see 9.5.4 to know that that was the 9.5 you were getting?
The repo always has the latest one, the latest minor version available. So I don't know if you can actually specify. I know in the Debian one, you have to go into the version pending when you want a specific minor version. I'm not quite sure how you would do that on CentOS.
Specify minor.
Okay, yeah.
And then I guess when you upgrade, it just dumps the newer version of the binaries right on top of
Mm-hmm.
whatever the previous versions were.
Yep. Yeah. So you can see it didn't actually make a cluster or anything for us. So go over here. And then done. So you actually won't be able to give the start command. Like if I try to, I think if I try to do this, the second one first, it complains that there's no service defined. Maybe not. Okay, it used to complain that there was no service defined. I think that's on, actually that's CentOS 5. It complains that there's no service defined, I think. But even though I started, that won't make the operating system automatically start it until you set this. That adds it to the initd script, so it will automatically start and stop as a service by the operating system. Yeah, it's what's the equivalent on update RD on Debian is the way you manage the services over there, but that's automatically managed by the cluster wrappers. So now Postgres is now running. Oop, yeah, and I'm not the Postgres user, so it's complaining. So, but it's up and running. It's not too hard. Any questions about CentOS?
So
Yes, Bruce.
check config, then can set it up so you know to start and stop it.
Yes. Yeah, and that's just the general service management. He was asking about the check config script. That's just the general command in CentOS for managing any service that you want to turn on and off, not just Postgres. That's for any service command.
So if I create a second cluster,
If you want to have it automatically start, like you saw, it was the command I gave. The command you gave here matches what's in here.
gotcha.
So if you make a 9.5 reporting date, it's like you call PostgreSQL 9.5-report. You go to sudo check config PostgreSQL 9.5-report on, and then that'll go and add it to the RC5, RC4, and on all those other init startup scripts. Yeah.
So where does systemd come into the picture?
It doesn't on CentOS 6. That's why I still was, yeah. I only did that because all of our clients that we have on CentOS are still on CentOS 6 or 5. Nobody we have is on CentOS 7. So I figured that was more common here as well as how to manage it here. How this is managed on CentOS 7, I have no idea yet. I have not looked at that yet. So
Come back next year for that.
yeah, good luck. So FreeBSD. I did this one because I actually run FreeBSD on my home server, so it was an interesting one to see how the packages and stuff are all actually managed on FreeBSD. It's quite different. So there's two ways to install packages on FreeBSD. There's either the package command, which manages installing the binary packages, same way as CentOS and Debian, but there's also the ports repository, which basically pulls down the source and compiles things and then installs that for you. Portmaster is a script for managing ports, and you can just say portmaster PostgreSQL 9.5, and it'll just go download it and do it all for you. The ports tree is generally more up to date than the packages. From what I've seen, the packages for Postgres are usually about a week or two, if not more, behind of when the new versions come out. Portmaster is almost the same day. So it all depends on how quickly you need that new version of which one you want to do. Either method, it's the same result in the end. So I actually much prefer the port managing ports myself on FreeBSD. So there's no package without a label on it for FreeBSD. So there's a server package, a client package, contrib, and docs. There's no separate libraries package or anything like that. That's all in the server, either the server or the client. It all depends on what you're looking to try to get. So you just install the server package, and then it'll install the client for you, and you'll be done. So as with CentOS, the default instance is not created on startup, so you have to go in there and do that yourself. This is the service. The service is in the local. There's the PostgreSQL service command in there. Like CentOS, it has its own initdb command with no options. That's what creates the default cluster for you on FreeBSD. And to start and stop it, it's got the same kind of options. To have Postgres start automatically on boot, it's pretty much how you manage almost any service on FreeBSD. There's an etcrc.conf file, and each service kind of has its own thing you have to go look up to see what it is you have to put in the file. For PostgreSQL, it's this enable equals yes, and that manages starting up both the one that it manages and the ones you can set up yourself later. That will start all of them up for you. So file locations, pretty much anything that's not on FreeBSD, anything that's not core operating system. Yes? Oh, I thought he had a question. Anything that's not a core operating system library or package, it goes in user local. So anything that ports installs goes in user local. Most things that package installs goes in user local. So that's where a lot of things in FreeBSD go. For a while, it was putting the data directory in user local, but that's mostly not where databases store things in FreeBSD. Most of them go in var. So as of 9.6, they're actually putting it in var, and you can see it does not have a versioned data directory. So that was a problem. Multiple major versions on FreeBSD are very, very hard right now, without a lot of manual intervention. So as of 9.6, they're moving towards that. So now it has its own version directory, and by default, it uses syslog for the Postgres logs. I'd recommend it go in there and change it to something that's more like the other OSs, where it either puts it in the PG log directory in the data directory, or you make your own log directory in var log for something like that. Throwing it in there with syslog makes it really hard to go in and try to debug things, because it's in there with all the other syslog information. So this is one of the things that was really confusing for a while. Is the default system user on FreeBSD is PGSQL. That means the default role that's made in the database is also PGSQL, but the default database is Postgres. So even if you change to the Postgres user, you still have to tell it you want to log into the Postgres database. As of 9.6, when that comes out, they're changing the system user to Postgres, and likely the super user role is also going to change. This is actually the default HBA that comes with Postgres source. Any local user, either socket or TCP, can just log in no matter what. So that's what the default is on FreeBSD. All other accesses are manual, and like all the other ones, the default only listens locally, so you have to fix that. So managing multiple versions and upgrades is a challenge, and they're actually working on fixing this right now. So you cannot install multiple major version packages at the same time. Neither package nor port master will allow it. So if you have to do a PG upgrade, you can't use the packages to do that. The only supported way that they have for doing it is a PG dump, shut down, install the new package, which will uninstall the old package, then and restore back in. The way I upgraded mine was I just did a source install and used that PG upgrade and upgraded my own instance myself. So and I just wrote this note, if you're using FreeBSD in production, I would much rather suggest you manage compiling source yourself versus using the ports tree even or the packages. It makes it a lot easier. So if you have a non-default data location, which you'll have if you're using anything but the service in NetDB, you kind of have to do the same thing that it depends on what you're doing. If you're only running one cluster on your database, there are actually options to the rc.conf that you can add to tell the default data directory to be in another location. And you can do that. This file has a bunch of options for it. You can set the new data directory here and some flags and all that kind of stuff here. But if you need to run multiple clusters, this does not support that. This only supports a single cluster. You can't define multiple clusters here. So what you do is kind of similar to what you do on CentOS. All you do is copy the PostgreSQL.conf file that it comes with, give it another name, and the service option knows to go through and read all of the files that are in that folder to start things up. So that's where that enable Postgres equals yes. It knows to go in there and read all of these. The other way that a lot of people do things too on FreeBSD is with jails. And if you run Postgres in jail, you can run as many clusters as you want, doing whatever you want. And it's more than I can get into in this talk. So I'm running out of time, so I don't really not going to really go do the demo on the FreeBSD right now. So the other way to do it is, you can do this on any operating system, is just compile from source. So the Debian, usually that requires some extra packages to be able to compile things. For Debian, you need to build essentials and for like GCC and make and all that kind of stuff. You also need readline and zlib for some of the stuff that Postgres compiles itself. For CentOS, kind of similar. It's got this. It doesn't have a build essentials package. It has this group install called development tools. That basically grabs everything. It's the equivalent of build essential in CentOS. And then again, you need the readline and zlib devel packages. For FreeBSD, all I actually had to install was gmake, because FreeBSD has its own version of make that Postgres doesn't like. It needs GNU make. So all I had to install was gmake, and then I was able to compile FreeBSD, Postgres on FreeBSD. If you are compiling from, this is if you just download the source, like the zip file, source files. If you actually download from the clone the Git repo or something like that, it's recommended you also get Bison and Flex. You don't need dev libraries, just Bison and Flex themselves installed for compiling the source. That's to get the documentation and stuff and all that working from the Git repo. So when you compile it yourself, there's quite a few compile options, but some of the more critical ones I have listed here. If you need more secure authentication, it's got options for SSL, GSS API, LDAP, and PAM. If you need PL Perl or PL Python, or PL, if you're still doing PL TCL, those are the languages that Postgres comes with. There's other languages that are available, but those aren't part of when you're compiling from source. So if you need those, you have to pass these at configure time. You can't just go add the language later after it's compiled. And if you're doing development work, I highly recommend setting both of these flags. This just enables more debug output if there's a problem, and it does additional assertion checks for when code is running and all that kind of stuff. So do not recommend turning those on if you're compiling for production, because you may crash your server if a CAssert fails. So you don't want to do that for production, but if you're doing development work, I highly recommend doing those. And if you actually want to build the contrib modules, if you just do make in the source directory and you don't say anything else, all that does is compile core. It does not compile any of the contrib modules or anything like that. If you say make world, that compiles most of the contrib modules. It does not compile all of them. The only one I know off the top of my head that it doesn't is USS or UUID OSSP is not one that's not compiled automatically by this. There's a few other ones in there. They're like example libraries and stuff that it doesn't do. But that gets you most of them, like PG Crypto and DB Link and all that kind of stuff. And then you actually have to do two different commands. If you want to actually install all the contrib modules, you have to say make install -world. You can't just do make install. So if you need some example service scripts for like the initd and all that kind of stuff in the source tree, they do give you some. I would much rather recommend you go look at, like, you actually go install a package somewhere and see what its service commands are, because they're much more up to date with what the operating system needs to manage starting and stopping services. But if you just need a framework to get yourself started, the source tree does come with some of those. And you can control where the binaries are installed during the configure phase. So you do configure -- prefix, and then my default is usually opt, and then I usually give a PGSQL and then XX for the major version. You can do that for the minor version, but then you have to be aware that when you install, every extension has to be reinstalled to the that new folder. If you have a recompile for a new folder for every minor version. So I would just recommend just doing the major version folder that way. And then what you can do is do a symlink. So what it'll be is opt PGSQL/bin will always point to whatever you want your current version to be. If you go upgrade to 9.6, then you just go update the symlink, and then you'll be on 9.6 for all your. It's basically doing what Update Alternatives did on CentOS and Debian, and then all you have to do is add that one path that one folder to your path, and then you're always looking at the latest binaries. For the data directory, I would always recommend you can have the PostgreSQL data directory on its own data mount point, of course. That's actually highly recommended, but I don't recommend putting the individual major version folder on its own mount point, because then if you ever run a PG upgrade and you want to use the link option, which allows you to do hard links to make the upgrade go faster, you can't do that across mount points. The old data directory and the new data directory have to be on the same mount point. So just as an example of how I have this set up on my FreeBSD system, I have this as the data directory mount point, but then if you go and do an ls in there, I have a 9.4 and a 9.5 folder in there. So it makes doing upgrades a lot easier when you manage it that way. Recommend that for source install or not source install. Either way is a good idea. That's it. So some convenience links there for anybody that needs them. If anybody have any other questions? Bruce?
I remember when we did upgraded before, a lot of people complained they couldn't get their OS to put two versions on the same system, which is kind of a problem. Is that what is driven? It looks like everyone now supports the major version specific multiple install.
Yes. Yeah. So he was talking about why you have, you see in a lot of places why you have the major version folder. In a lot of the other operating systems, they have the 9.4, the 9.5 folder. I think PG Upgrade has been part of that drive, but it's also to allow easier installation of multiple versions of the major operating system. But then for the data directory itself, doing the folder and not the mount point is because of PG Upgrade, to make doing PG Upgrade easier with the link option. Yeah.
Just sort of a comment, because I was a little bit surprised seeing this. If you're on a Mac and you use Mac ports, which I would tend to say is designed like the BSD port system, but they actually have all the versioning stuff like worked out pretty nicely.
Yeah.
Like it's not quite as full on as Debian, but like it's all major version, like for each one a different port for each major version. You can install them side by side. So like it's a bit more advanced than the actual BSD ports layout, which is far.
Yeah, and I did this presentation at PGCon this year, and Dan Langwell, I think is how you say his name. He runs that conference, but he also runs BSDCan, and he also helps maintain the PostgreSQL ports and all that kind of stuff. And thankfully, he came to my presentation, and he's like, "Wow, this is really bad. I should do something about that." So that's why you can see that 9.6 is already starting down that road of trying to allow multiple major versions. They need to do a lot of changes to the packages themselves, so they're not conflicting with each other, and do a lot of other work to get that done. But hopefully it'll get there. That's it. All right. Thank you.